I think we're on cue. Hi, everyone. I'm Jim Provenzano. I'm the arts and nightlife editor for the Bay Area Reporter, and I'm thrilled to begin and kick off and stage manage our 5th monthly Bar Talks YouTube and Facebook channel talks. And this time we're talking about the leather community, the pioneering journalism from various writers and people in the community. And I'll hand it over to our guest host, Race Bannon, who is a prolific author and speaker and community member. Yay! And he was our last, actually our third or fourth and most recent leather columnist for the B.A.R. Race, hand it over to you.
Thank you, Jim. I really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Very much appreciated. I will not introduce myself because Jim just did that just fine. So let me introduce the rest of the panel that is going to be talking about the leather and kink community as seen through the eyes of 50 years of coverage through the Bay Area Reporter. And I think that that's a pretty remarkable thing, and that we have that archive of the San Francisco Bay Area leather culture is pretty amazing. So speaking of that, let me introduce Gayle Rubin first, because Gayle will always be upset with me when I call Gayle not only an anthropologist, but an historian, because in my view, Gayle is the #1 authority on San Francisco Bay Area leather culture. And I would actually say that that extends to leather culture generally, but absolutely regarding our local Bay Area leather culture, Gayle Rubin.
Thank you, Race.
Graylin Thornton, notable local icon, I'll say it that way. Former Mr. Drummer, 1993. Prior to that, he was very involved in the South Bay's Kink organization. He's been an organizer and an activist in our scene for a long time. And most recently, he was I'll call him the grandfather. Sorry to age you, Graylin, but the grandfather of Onyx Northwest, which is the local chapter of Onyx, which is a leather organization for men of color. And there's actually a sister organization called Pearls, I think, Onyx Pearls, that is also for women in the scene that are of color. Next is Scott Brogan, who was my predecessor as the columnist. He wrote the column for a number of years prior to me writing it, and after the famous Mr. Marcus first wrote it. And he was a Mr. Edge, I believe, correct?
Right.
Shaking head. Did I get that right? Yes. I'm doing it from memory. And I think one of the most notable things about Scott was he represented boy culture, something that was kind of emerging at the time in the leather scene, not just as somebody who participated, but as somebody who actively made sure that that segment of the community was recognized, and that meant both socially in contests, et cetera. Also did very well at International Mr. Leather. That was, I believe you placed top 5.
That's right, yeah. Number four, almost.
Yeah, so close to that podium. And last but not least is Rich Stadtmiller. There is no photographer walking the planet that I know of that has taken more photos at leather and kink events than Rich. Certainly in the San Francisco Bay Area, but I would say nationally. And his archives literally have hundreds of thousands of photos in them. It is a visual archive of our local and national leather history, unlike any other, in my opinion. And also just a darn nice guy. Every time Rich points a camera at you, you want to stop because you like the guy, and you go, sure, take my picture, because that's the way Rich is. So he has and one of the nice things about Rich's photos, of many of which you will see today, by the way, is that they're very often very personal. They aren't just big event photos. You actually see some sort of connection between the people that are in the photo. And I think that's one of the things that's so lovely about his photos. So that is our panel. Let me start off by asking each of you your connection to the B.A.R. in whatever way you want to mention that, but also why do you think the fact that the Bay Area Reporter was so welcoming of the leather community in terms of its journalism very early on. Why is that important to our community generally? Gayle, I'm going to pick on you.
Yeah, I mean, the B.A.R. is essentially our paper of record. I mean, it's not the New York Times. It doesn't have the resources or the fact checking, but it is really our paper of record. And the fact is that it has had a leather presence since the very first issue. There was a column by somebody called the Tsarina de Miracle Mile, whom I have just determined in the last 20 minutes was none other than Paul Bentley, who was the owner of the Ramrod, one of the premier leather bars, and also was the co-founder of the B.A.R. with Bob Ross. And he had an alternate persona as a drag queen. He was Luscious Lorelei. And the Tavern Guild gave him the title early on of Tsarina de Miracle Mile. And there's a column by the Tsarina de Miracle Mile in the very first B.A.R. And there were about a half a dozen of them before that stopped. And then about a year later, Mr. Marcus started Southern Scandal. So the B.A.R. has had a leather presence really since it began. And it's important that we be able to have print sources like this. One of the things about print, even though it's now digitized, it was printed in the first place. So you have a record of what it was when it happened. One of the problems with digital sources that begin digitally is that they can be altered, which keeps them up to date, but then you don't get what they were saying, what they actually recorded initially. So having this 50-year record is just amazing in the B.A.R. And I was able to determine who the Tsarina of the Miracle Mile was by looking into the B.A.R. archives, the obituaries, and finding Paul Bentley's obituary. So there's a piece of data that I was able to obtain just a few minutes ago to determine who that first leather columnist was. And I'll say one other quick thing about the B.A.R. having all of this leather coverage. It has really helped particularly the San Francisco community come together as such, because we had newspaper coverage, we had news, we had events listings. You could actually just open the B.A.R. and find out what was happening, know where to go, what was happening that week or that week. And I really think it helped the community to be a community in a way that one misses when there isn't an immediate leather columnist. And there have been periods, like right now, where there is no dedicated leather columnist. So it's been really important.
Yeah, and I believe Mr. Marcus began writing the column about 10 months after the founding of the Bay Area Reporter. I believe that's correct. So you're right. From the very, very beginning, the Bay Area Reporter was, and I may say B.A.R., by the way, if anyone hears me say B.A.R., I often say that, was right there with the leather community early on. Scott, you wrote for us,
Right.
B.A.R. for a while. Why was it important for you to be a columnist? What did it mean to you?
Well, probably twofold. I mean, I was friends with Marcus, as we all were, and he was one of the people that helped welcome my husband Doug and I when we first moved here and became a part of the community in the early 2000s. He was always very supportive. He and I always got along from day one, and which was kind of funny because the first time I met him was actually when I competed with his calendar on stage, and all the guys who were prepping me were telling me to be careful what I say, what I do. Don't piss off Mr. Marcus. I hadn't even seen him yet. And I pictured this big ogre up there, and he was up there, and I was so nervous, and I got up there and he and I just clicked from day one. And I wrote for the San Francisco Silent Film Festival as well. So it was kind of an extension of that. And then also I wanted to extend that and keep writing and keep flexing my writing muscles. And then also just to carry it on, because I was a little nervous that it might die off after he died. And so luckily Queen Cougar was the one that championed me originally with the folks at the B.A.R. and got me in there. And yeah, I'm very, very excited that I got to do it. And I loved every minute of it. I really did. And working with Jim as well.
Jim, let me just say, Jim, if anybody's listening that I've written for before, he's one of the finest, best editors I've ever worked for. My goodness, what a good editor. What a good editor. I'm not saying that because he's on the stream. I absolutely adored working with him. Rich, nobody has published more leather community photos in the B.A.R. than you, I don't think. I think Jim is agreeing with me. So what was it like? Why was it important for you to be involved with the paper?
It was the paper of record, and I was recording history. So obviously, if history was going to be illustrated in print, somebody's got to do it.
And when you took a photo, I know you sometimes had little patterns that you did with the people that, like you would say something to them to make them turn. Was there anything in particular that would entice people to turn around for your camera?
Well, instead of saying "say cheese," of course I'd always say sleaze. That used to get to people. And it was interesting that you have to approach people in a playful manner. And so everybody knows that it's okay to let down your guard and act a little bit silly. And I'll make you look good, even when you're being silly.
And you do. You absolutely do. Graylin.
I will say really quick with Rich, one thing that's really great that he did with his photos is he would show up at the next event with prints in separate little envelopes with everyone's names and give them out. I mean, he went that extra step, that extra mile to make sure that we all had prints of pictures that he had taken of us previously. Thank you, Rich, for doing that.
You're welcome.
And Graylin, you are, I think, the longest standing resident of the Bay Area on this panel. I may be wrong, but I think that's correct. Because you come from San Jose, is that correct?
Yes.
So,
I went to college in San Jose.
So why was the Bay Area Reporter important to you as a younger Kinkster in the Bay Area? And what did it mean to you?
Well, growing up in the Bay Area, especially down in San Jose, we needed to know what was going on. And more than that, as people started putting on events, we needed a place to advertise our events. So it was felt that if your event was not in Marcus's column, then it was going to be a flop. Also, if Marcus panned your event at the end of it, you'd never have another event. So it was really important as a place to advertise because there was no Facebook. So it was the Facebook of the day. But Marcus really did control the flow, basically, of events in the Bay Area.
That's very true. And one of the things that Jim has done that I think that we can maybe start with one of the first images, Jim, is he has compiled a remarkably beautiful sequential series of images and articles, et cetera, that we can use as talking points as we move through the many, many years that the Bay Area Reporter has covered our scene.
Yeah, let me get the screen up and just say that there were 4 odd years, 92 to 94, and then 2006 to 2008, where I edited Marcus's column. And owe it to his military history that they were pretty much error-free, except for a comma here and there. One time he got someone's name wrong. Encyclopedic in terms of how he could remember and record what happened and what was going to happen, and always handed it in on time. And until he got ill in 2008, so he was definitely one of the better writers to work with as well. Let me get to the full screen. Share screen. Is this share? Oh, okay. Hold on.
Time tunnel.
Marcus also began reporting in an era when we didn't have smartphones and we couldn't video record and snap easily something, and so he had to be sort of very aware of what he was recording and take copious notes, unlike some of us that would sometimes rely on video or photos.
Yeah.
Gayle, I think this is a pretty famous image.
This is the opening 2 pages of the Life magazine story in 1964 on homosexuality in America. And it shows the interior of the toolbox, which was the first leather bar south of Market. Not the first leather bar here, but first one south of Market. It was on the corner of 4th and Harrison where the Whole Foods is now. And in the back, you see the famous mural painted by Chuck Arnett, who is one of the men in the photo, along with his friends who also helped with the art there, Bill Tellman, and in the far corner, Mike Caffey. Mike Caffey is the person who did the Leather David, famous later on associated with Phoebe's. And the another man in the photo is Jack Haynes, who opened up many places, including a short-lived leather bar over in the Western Addition. He was the person who opened Phoebe's in the south of the slot, and is widely credited with having brought fisting to San Francisco.
Yay!
They're all in that photo.
Am I correct that the Why Not was actually the first leather bar?
Why
but
Not was the
some?
first dedicated leather bar. It was in the Tenderloin, and it didn't last very long. Here's the
Oh, there it is.
and it was managed by a guy named Tony Tavarozzi, who later was a bartender at the Toolbox. Before the Why Not, there were leather guys, but there was no dedicated leather bar. They used to hang out at other, like some of the waterfront dives and other bars in and around Lower Market.
Let me go back to the first B.A.Rs.
Yeah, sorry. There was the Tsarina de Miracle Mile. And then here's another example. There was an ad on the back of, full-page ad on the back of one of the early issues for these royal scandals. You'll see it's presented by the Imperial Court, but at the Covered Wagon, which is where the Oasis is now. And all of this really shows that although there was a profound opposition between the sort of femininity of the court and the drag scene and the leather scene, there was a ton of overlap, and there were a ton of connections among these different parts of the community.
Yeah, I think it's if you've been with the local, at least, leather community for a long time, you've realized that there's a pretty close tie between the drag community and the leather community, certainly when it came to our events. I think that there was always a certain amount of respect between the two communities about attending each other's events. And it was cool.
And Marcus was really good about blending that in his column as well. He would make sure to shout out if there was a combined event or if there was something that was leather kink adjacent or something.
So this is one of Marcus's earliest columns, Southern Scandals. The use of all caps is quite prolific. Thankfully, was done away with by at least 10 years later.
He was an emphatic person.
Yeah. Here's that lovely Why Not ad with that's a Tom of Finland, right, Gayle?
No, it's not Tom of Finland.
No.
People who think it's a Tom of Finland.
No.
Other people think it's was painted by or drawn by Tony Tavarozzi, the manager. There's some suggestion it might have been a Chuck Arnett. It's really unclear, but probably not Tom of Finland.
Okay, but inspired by, yes?
Not necessarily. People tend to think that Tom of Finland was the only person or the first person to do this kind of art, and that just wasn't true. There was Etienne in Chicago. There was a whole group of physique artists from the early period, of whom Tom of Finland is the most famous, but he certainly wasn't the only one.
Right. Okay.
And just if you could go back to that image for just a second, one of the things that I think is interesting is that the leather community was very much the leather Levi community to a great extent. And if you notice, there's actually leather like sewn into the where the leg and the crotch is. And some guys used to retrofit their jeans with this leather insert, which of course you could ride a bike on, but it also looked really hot. Sorry, that was just an aside.
Guy Baldwin had Larry Hunt do that, I think, to a pair of his jeans.
Yep.
This is another artist column.
And notice that it says Emperor Marcus.
Right.
That he was the very first emperor of San Francisco when they decided to add emperor to the court.
And according to the B.A.R. obituary on Paul Bentley, it was his idea to add the emperor to the court system.
Oh, I did not know that.
Which I did not know until, an hour ago. Let's hear it for printed archives.
That's great. That's brilliant.
And there's nothing like well-dressed leatherman in formal leather to set off a pretty lady.
Certainly.
Walking arm in arm.
We're up to 1974, and here's a photograph on the bottom center of Marcus I with Polk Street Sally at a celebratory wedding. Made the front cover of that issue.
Polk Street Sally was quite a well-known person of the day.
And this poster down in the right-hand corner of this page, this was one of Bill Tellman was another artist, and this was one that he drew up for the slot.
So comparatively, there's an S&M party advertised at the boot camp, and Marcus got a 2-page spread. Again, more all caps for names and emphasis. Triple question marks followed by ellipses. I would go to hell trying to proofread this in my opinion. It would have driven me nuts. And this, of course, this was when they were doing paste up. They were printed out in photostats and then literally cut and pasted onto a board, a cardboard board. Your toilet water makes an entrance as an advertiser.
Is that like video head cleaner?
I think so.
Yeah, a roll-up. It's a roll-up. And the boot camp was still pretty popular too. Now, I included this because it's the first, what I noticed, one of the first S&M films advertised and screened at the Laurel Theater.
And I love that there's an ad down at the bottom for Chuck, the Golden Shower Queen. He was a figure south of Market, and he used to wear all yellow leathers. And I had a friend who worked at Hamburger Mary's and said he'd come in and order all yellow food, like you'd have an omelet.
Oh my gosh!
Everything had to be yellow. He was a total fetishist.
Val Martin, the guy pictured, was a rather iconic figure.
That's right.
Yeah, he was
the first Mr. Drummer.
It says runner-up Mr. CMC Carnival 1976, voted Mr. Leather LA.
But that he might have been the first Mr. Drummer. After that, I'd have to look that up. But he was also one of the people arrested when the LAPD busted a charity slave auction that was put on by the drummer folks. The Mark IV bust, which was covered in Marcus at some point. We have that coming up, but that was a huge event. They had hundreds of police and I think 4 helicopters they claimed that they were freeing the slaves, and they arrested about 100 people. They ended up prosecuting really about 4, including I think Val Martin and the publisher of Drummer John Embry and the editor of Drummer Gene Barney and one other person. And that was why Drummer ended up moving from LA up to San Francisco.
Wow. Okay.
To escape the police harassment of the LAPD.
So the style changed a little. It improved the fonts and things. Here, of course, Marcus is with, on the left, Mr. Drummer Ray Perea. And on the right, classics porn star Al Parker.
Oh, yes.
One of the most famous porn stars ever.
Yes. And also one of the most prolific photographers of the gay community, LGBT community, it wasn't called that then, Robert Pruzan, who was taking pictures for the paper then and became a fine art photographer, but his stuff is amazing.
Robert Pruzan and another photographer who did a lot for the B.A.R. was Rink, of course.
Yes, this is a Rink photo, I think, here talking about the fire. Do you want to talk about this, Gayle?
Yeah, the Folsom Street fire in 1981 was just a huge big deal. It first of all, it was a huge fire, 5-alarm fire. It burned a lot of the area over by Hallam Alley and Brush Place and burned several dungeons and apartments of several of the men who lived there, including the artist Rex, Alexis Sorel, who was one of the founders of the 15 and Black Leather Wings. And it burned part of Mark Chester's apartment and kind of stopped, I think, at the door to his bedroom. And there was all this crazy coverage of the fire where the people were saying that they expected to find the bodies of slaves chained to their beds in the ruins. Of course, they found no bodies of slaves chained anywhere. But it was a huge event and was part of the it burned the alley. A lot of what was rebuilt there were fancier condos, so it was part of the redevelopment of this neighborhood. And this is the article here about the bust on the slave auction, the Mark IV raid in L.A. that for which Val Martin was one of the people arrested, along with Embry and Gene Barney, driving Drummer up to San Francisco. And Drummer coming to San Francisco was one of the reasons that the San Francisco leather community became so famous. We had a lot of press coverage here. We had Marcus. We also had Drummer. Yeah. And so the fact that so much of this press was here made the San Francisco scene much more world famous than it probably otherwise would have been.
Right. And not just in South of Market, but here's an article in 1982 by Mark Hippler about leather bars in the Castros. Well, sort of leather bars. I never considered the Detour or Castro station to be leathery, but I guess.
I got luckier at Castro Station than almost any bar in San Francisco, so I consider it a leather bar.
Okay, points up. Goodness. I got luckier at the Detour because the beer was cheaper. I don't know. Anyway, here's a lovely 2-page spread by yet another leather columnist, a lesser-known gentleman named Carl Stewart.
One reason he's lesser known is that he didn't do the column very long, but also he died in 1987. So he was an early death, and he's kind of vanished from people's memories more.
Yeah, with no one to.
But he does have a lovely obituary in the B.A.R. And those B.A.R. obituaries are online through the LGBT Historical Society.
Yes, and Tom Birch, who spearheaded that before we even had these full PDFs available online. Just an amazing.
Yeah, it's an amazing resource.
You can also, if you go to our YouTube page and the Facebook page, you can see the chat I had with Liz Highlyman and Tom Birch about the AIDS coverage in the B.A.R. and his process of working on the obituary project. Just lovely photos here that the Carl era was quite visual. There were many more. If you want to go to archive.org, you can find and download PDFs of these lovely page spreads of. And on the left in the lower photo, I think is Mark Abramson of Men Behind Bars fame. I can't read the caption, but there were lots of folks. And a drag queen, Casa Luna.
And we could get away with more butts back then.
The photos sort of look like they look like the fantasies done during Drummer Week or Alan Selby's Fetish and Fantasy. It has that fantasy feel, so this might be during Leather Week. I can't quite read the dates.
It's June 1984, but that doesn't mean that these events.
There was no Leather Week in 1984.
No. Well, something happened.
Yeah.
Let me go back to the original Parade of Delight. This is a leather-related events during Pride Month or Pride Week, what it was called then. But then the first Folsom Street Fair here is covered in September 1984.
I think we're missing Scott. He's trying to get back into the room.
Oh, should I have to get out of the preview mode. Hold on a second.
Oh, we lost Scott?
We lost Scott.
Oh,
let me know if you see him again. Let's continue, and then let me know when his window. I can't see the various windows while I'm doing the slideshow. So 1984 has this multiple articles and multiple photos, mostly by Robert Pruzan, an article by Alan White about the first Folsom Street Fair, or Megahood, as it was called, Megahood 84.
And for those who don't know, it was not actually, although someone managed to find the leather events to photograph, but it was not a leather or gay event. It was a neighborhood event to try to resist the encroachment of the redevelopment that was spreading out from the Moscone Center at the time. The two founders, one was a leatherman, Michael Valerio, and the other was a lesbian, Kathleen Cannell. But they were also land use activists who were really trying to resist what is now thought of as the gentrification of this neighborhood.
I think it's really an important point because so often we hear certain members of the community say, oh, there's people at the Folsom Street Fair who aren't kinky, who aren't part of our community. Mm-hmm. The truth is, from the very beginning, it was a fairly diverse crowd that attended Folsom Street Fair.
And it became more leathery over time. And one of the things that made it more leathery was the origin of Leather Week, which was done by Tony DeBlas, I think around 88, when he had taken over Drummer and was running the drummer contest. And the drummer contest was then, I think, in the summer in June or something. And Alan Selby had this AIDS fundraiser, Fetish and Fantasy. And Tony decided that if Alan would move Fetish and Fantasy, that they should all move it to the week before Folsom Street. Fetish and Fantasy would happen on the Thursday, and then the drummer contest would happen on Saturday, and everyone would pour into the Folsom Street Fair on Sunday. And he dubbed this Leather Pride Week, and that's how we got Leather Week.
Okay. Huh.
You know, speaking of the Alan's Fetish and Fantasy, that was the time where they introduced all the drummer contestants, and at that time they all brought baskets from where they were from. So during Fetish and Fantasy, they would auction off the baskets for the contestants to show where they were coming from, and that would raise a lot of money for the charity, which was the AIDS Emergency Fund, I think, at that time.
So these were not baskets in their pants, but baskets full of prizes.
Baskets full of goodies.
There was one guy who actually had a basket that he wore as sort of like a jock strap in which one could put money, but he was later in IML. But yeah, there was a basket auction, and there were lots of interpretations of the basket. Graylin, did you do a basket?
I did a basket, yes.
Do you remember what was in it?
I do because I'm from Northern California, so I had everything from Mr. S, but also the owner of Leather Masters was one of my friends, so I had stuff from Leather Masters. But then I went all over Northern California accumulating things so that it would be a truly Northern California basket.
Like some eucalyptus or something.
A whale, some redwoods, you know.
That's cute. Well, we do see some baskets on display in the upper right-hand photo with another Cruzan. And I'm just dwelling on this. I'm holding off on this because I want to show this is a rare instance where both Carl Stewart was still writing the leather column and Marcus returned from a short absence in time for this event, in time for September 1984 for the Mega Hood. And then Marcus apparently took over, or there was shared space.
Oh, and Jim, Scott says he's still in the waiting room.
Okay, sorry about this. Visuals, I cannot see him. I'm going in the waiting room. I cannot. Oh, there he is. Are you back, Scott?
Yep, there I am.
Yeah.
Oh, hi.
You didn't hear anything I had to say. Terrible.
Well, we're up to 1987, and this is the first international Ms. Leather.
Yeah.
This was actually not the first Ms. Leather contest. Samoa, which was the lesbian SM group, held a Ms. Leather contest back in '81.
Oh.
This was the first international Ms. Leather.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you a funny story about Marcus. He really did not pay much attention to women. Women were sort of not on his radar. And so those of us who were involved in the women's SM community had a hard time getting coverage for our events until IMSL, until this International Ms. Leather. And finally, Marcus began to really cover the women's leather events with this one.
Well, there is a tradition that I will admit that is a stereotype, but also true, that it was predominantly a gay white male publication for many years.
It may have been. I mean, we got little ads in the B.A.R. and found, we were able to get some coverage, but it was pretty minimal until this. Marcus got on board with IMSL.
Yeah.
No, I also want to point out that the first International Ms. Leather, Judy Tallwing, is Native American, so I think it was a really big deal for the first International Ms. Leather to be a Native American woman, and she's still very much involved today.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's
her down in the lower left-hand corner.
Right.
Yes.
But note that it's a woman writer, and Darlene took these photos. So Marcus didn't cover this. It took someone else to assign someone else to cover this. Just to note, a bit of critique, none of us are, but that Marcus didn't write about this. So it took someone else to do this. And here's back to Marcus's B.A.R. Bazaar with hunks. And this is at the Eagle Bar with the big banner there. Cartoons got better off. And here's another 1988. We're up to now. Porn bits. Interesting juxtaposition. And on the left is
Marcus
in 1988 at the Eagle. These are all his photos.
And is that Coulter Thomas over on the?
It is Coulter.
Coulter
That is
Thomas,
yes.
publicity photo. And we went through Marcus's archives, and these are his actual original photos from that same event in glorious color print. And I scanned.
For those that have been to the SF Eagle, those photos, the bottom two photos, are the SF Eagle, and you'll notice that where the balloons are, that's where the stage is that you would normally see. So the Eagle has been sort of the center of leather life in San Francisco for a very, very, very long time.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. in those big circular murals that hung there for years and have changed over the years. But I think it's pretty amazing. And the ubiquitous Sharon McKnight, who would just show up for any benefit whatsoever. She was in one of our first chats, looking like a 12-year-old.
Oh, Tony.
Tony DeBlas.
Tony, for those who may not know, was one of the key figures in leather in the 20th century. He started he was a member of the Chicago Hellfire Club. He was very involved in the Inferno events, the big party that the CHC put on, but he really made his mark as a publisher. He started out with a little newsletter called Dungeon Master, and then he and his partner bought Drummer, and they moved to San Francisco in 1986. And it was Tony who, as I mentioned earlier, kind of declared Leather Week and helped to bring more leather to the Folsom Fair. He also designed and introduced the Leather Pride flag that we all know. And Race, do you think this is with him announcing the Leather Pride flag at IML?
I do think so. I was there when he did, and one of the things that I remember very clearly of him saying is he said, I could have pulled together a committee of people or a group, but you know how that goes. So I'm going to just design a flag. You like it or you don't. And here it is. And that was that.
And it obviously really took off, but he got a raft of grief for doing it. And he got a nasty letter from someone who shall remain nameless, but was one of the key people in New York City, complaining that he was not consulted about the Leather Pride flag.
Well, there always has to be a consult.
I'm sure that letter is in Tony's papers, which are at the Leather Archives and Museum in Chicago, if anyone wants to go find it.
Well, the funny thing about the flag is for years and years, people tried to assign meaning to the colors. Mm-hmm. And there were debates and contests on, the heart on it means your heart and love for leather. And then finally, Tony said, those colors don't mean a thing. You can interpret them any kind of way that you want. But people were so insistent that, they had all this meaning to them.
Wow.
Well, he wanted people to just sort of, guess, make their own assumptions about it. He did talk about the specific design, but someday that will all come out.
And Gayle, I'm not sure if you just mentioned it, that Tony was one of the key people that founded the Leather Archives and Museum in Chicago.
Oh, yeah, Tony and Chuck Renslow were key people in founding the Leather Archives and Museum.
I still have my copy of his leather timeline that he wrote. I don't know how many years ago, but it's a great resource.
It is, although I have to say, I love Tony. He was a scholar and a gentleman, but he was not a historian, and some pieces of that timeline should be treated with some skepticism.
Scott, I have looked at that timeline, and then I have called Gayle and said, "Is this right?"
Speaking of skepticism,
I see you have one of my first appearances in the B.A.R. This was in 1989. There's a tiny story I have to tell about this. In 1984, for the first Folsom Street Fair, Michael Valerio got a hold of me and said, "Please write something up about the history of gay leather south of Market for the program for Megahood." Well, and I did. I am not known for brevity, so it was fairly long. And if you've ever seen a program for the first Megahood, it's very tiny and sparse. There was no room in the program for my article. So Michael arranged for it to be published in the Sentinel. And it duly was. It was called Valley of the Kings, based on Marcus's nickname for South of Market. In 1989, a few years later, by then, Michael was running a little paper called the Southern Oracle. And he said, "I want you to write an update this was like 6 years later." So I wrote something called Requiem for the Valley of the Kings for that issue of the Southern Oracle, which was the program for Folsom Street that year. Meanwhile, somebody at the B.A.R. wrote an article about the Folsom Street Fair and pretty much plagiarized the article. And this was the little nice retraction that the B.A.R. Printed, their apology about what had happened. And I don't even remember the name of the guy who wrote the article or what happened, but
nobody does. Plagiarists are doomed to obscurity. Yeah, I just thought it was really cool that they did that, because there very rarely is that kind of error happen in the paper during my time.
And very rarely in most kind of community-based papers does anyone give a flying rat's tail, and they usually just let it go. I mean, the B.A.R. it's not the New York Times, but there have been real journalists running this paper for a long time and working there, and it's much appreciated.
Thank you. I like that.
With real journalistic ethics.
And lovely photos like this one by the beloved,
Yes.
who's now working for the other team. But I just thought it was a very Halloween.
That's another Mr. Drummer contest photos.
Right. And here we have the page tribute to Brian Dawson and multiple other people, but mostly Brian Dawson.
And rightly so.
Yeah.
Wonderful man.
As I said earlier, I remember seeing him in Playgirl magazine, and my teenage gaydar said, that guy is not completely straight, even though
Not completely. Not completely,
No, he had allegedly a wife and children, but to see how he became such an icon of the kink community was very satisfying in my old age.
Well, he did a lot of, oh God. Okay.
What?
I will shut up now. I was going to say Brian did a bunch of porn with some of the, there was a group called Brian's Boys, and every boy wanted to be a Brian's boy in one of his movies.
Yeah.
He did some of it in my dungeon.
Steel Dungeon 1 and 2. Yes, I have them memorized almost as much as the score for Little Night Music. Yeah, they're classics of the genre. In fact, they were all filmed at a warehouse in South of Market that was catty-cornered from the old B.A.R. offices, as far as I know. But maybe I'm wrong. I might be wrong there. Anyway,
those are the Brush Creek Media offices.
Oh, yeah. But the warehouse where they literally strung each other up and did things.
The Brush Creek Media offices were next to the B.A.R. Offices. I want to know where that warehouse was. There was one.
It's next door to the Lone Star.
Right.
The warehouse was right next door to the Lone Star. You had to know it was there.
Right. It's hidden away.
Yeah.
Like a cul-de-sac. Anyway, this is another lovely photo spread. Another one from 1989 from Folsom Street Fair. Here's the guy in the bottom is doing his Mapplethorpe impersonation.
Wait, Jim, can you go back one?
Yeah. That?
Yeah. Yeah. No, never mind.
Oh no, you're gonna tell a story?
No,
we want the story, Graylin.
I'm not. We can. I just wanted to be sure, and now we can fast forward.
Okay. Yeah, we all have memories. Masters, daddies, boys, slaves. There's even leather phone sex ads. I love that. That's so equal opportunity. Speaking of which,
and look who it is.
Oh, that guy.
What a baby.
I know. I don't know what year that is, but
December 1990.
December 1990. Wow, that was during the time period where we were doing a lot of fundraising at the Eagle, and Mr. Marcus and Alan Selby and Vern Stewart were pretty much behind that. And this looks like this is sort of my beginning. In terms of being a leatherman. So,
Graylin, since sometimes the South Bay, doesn't get a lot of highlighting sometimes, can you tell people what Slug was?
Oh, Slug was South Bay Leather and Uniform Group. And it was started in 86, 87, and I was one of the founding members because I was hanging out in the bars, and a guy walked up to me and said, "We're going to start a leather club. Want to be in it?" And I said, "Sure." So that was pretty much it. And I didn't own any leather at that time, not a stitch of it. But I hung out in the leather bar because I liked the men.
Okay.
And look where you
That's
are.
how a lot of people got started, I think.
Yeah.
And Slug, one of the things
Leather Love.
Slug published a cookbook. There's a South Bay Leather and Uniform Club group cookbook.
Yes.
Which was done, I guess, as a fundraiser. Were you involved in that at all?
I was not. I was there, but I was not. I was not a cook at that time.
You are now.
I am now.
I don't know if anyone recognizes people in this page spread, but it's very festive. Marcus generally got a 2-page spread by this time by the late 80s, early 90s. It was like he really took over the back end of the paper.
And I love the ads around it.
Some of the Taste of Leather, Shea Malay, some of these were like long-standing advertise support. Folsom Gulch. This kind of came and went. The phone sex ads kind of came and went according to their program.
I have a funny story about Folsom Gulch. Back in the I think it's 1930s, it was that particular site was an electrical wholesaler called More Dick Electric, MOHRDICK.
Well, that's fitting.
What are the odds?
Oh gosh.
The Gulch is still there.
Speaking of that, I think
look, it's Graylin winning Northern California Mr. Drummer.
exactly.
Wow.
Graylin, what was it like to compete that year?
You know, a very fast, funny story. I competed for Mr. Santa Clara County Leather, and I got first runner-up. And so the winner got to go to IML. And so they sent me to Northern California Drummer. It was sort of like the consolation prize. And so, you know, I went begrudgingly, and I won that. And yeah, I think it was the first time a black man had won Northern California Drummer in San Francisco. So it was a pretty big deal to me at that time. And that's Spot, my drummer boy. He has a different name now, but then his name was Spot.
Oh, Paul Spot Galea,
Yes.
drummer boy. July
Can
6th.
I just say that because I was one of the judges when Graylin won, that when the judges conferred, there was no question who won.
That was international. Were you there for Northern Cal?
Pardon?
You were at the
Sorry,
international.
I'm ahead of
band.
myself.
That's okay. And Daddy Irwin Kane, who's no longer with us, named Spot.
Oh, I remember him. Is he still around?
No. Daddy Irwin, no.
No, I meant Spot.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Oh.
he's definitely around. Okay, is this like my year?
Yeah, it is. It is.
Okay.
1993 was the year of Graylin. Yep.
Yeah, okay.
No, I just did a name search in archive and I found some of your best stuff.
Oh, thank you.
More folks. Drummer. Now, Gayle or someone, can you explain the Spanner defense?
The Spanner refers to the arrest of about 16 gay men in England who were kinky and they were having a private party in someone's home. They did a video of this party, which fell into the hands of the police who were investigating child porn. And they decided instead to arrest all these guys. And they charged them not with SM, which wasn't criminal, but with assault. And since assault is a felony, they charge the tops with assault and they charge the bottoms with aiding and abetting an assault upon their own persons.
Wow.
They also charged them with homosexuality in public because when homosexuality was decriminalized in England, it was decriminalized in private, and private was defined as no more than 2 people. So the minute you had 3 people, much less 16, even though this was in a private home, this was considered to be a criminal offense of homosexual sex in public.
Wow.
So a lot of these men went to prison, and it was a terrible, it was just a terrible incident. And there was a tremendous amount of fundraising in the United States to pay for the appeals, the legal appeals, first to the House of Lords and then to the European Court. The Spanner defendants lost both of those appeals. Their convictions were upheld.
Wow.
So this was part of the fundraising for the legal fees to appeal those cases.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
You know, one of the things that I remember from that was there was a little bit of controversy because San Francisco's charity was the AIDS Emergency Fund. And to raise for something else, people just felt like, that's over there and we're here and we need to take care of our own. So although we were raising money on both sides, not everyone was down with that.
Right. Yeah. There was some controversy, even if anything that wasn't, why are you not doing, the thing? And I just want to point out that Alan Selby, who's mentioned, is on, and Gayle are in the photo on the lower right.
Oh, look at that.
Oh,
I don't know if you remember what event this is, but I can't zoom in.
I have no idea. What's the date on it?
It is 1999, April 1999.
I don't know.
Anyway, there you are.
And for those who might not know, I mean, since many people know Mr. S Leather south of Market, the S in Mr. S is Alan Selby.
That's
Selby.
a good point.
Daddy Alan Selby.
Mhm.
And finally, Marcus is a little bit more women inclusive.
That is Joe Blas, who was also an international Ms. Leather, and that is her ex-partner Annie, who now runs Ms. San Diego Leather.
And this is one of many events that Marcus went to. This is in Dallas, the caption says. He was flown as a judge to how many? I mean, dozens or hundreds of events throughout every year, and would always like show up right on time on Monday with his column ready to go, whether pre-internet or whatever. I just was amazed at how much traveling he did to go attend all these events, like Mal, Mid-Atlantic Leather. Is that right?
Yes.
Correct. Yeah.
So he was a photojournalist. I mean, a traveling photojournalist through these years.
But it was true that if your event wasn't in his column, then it wasn't going to be a success. So one of the ways to make sure your event got coverage was to invite him to be there. So you just flew him there, and that way he had to cover your event. And that's true. That's how it happened.
Not the most ethical, but functional.
Hey.
But by this time, weren't there other leather publications by 2002, folks?
Well,
Oh,
the
yeah.
Leather Journal was out there, Gayle.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there had been Drummer, but
Oh, wait,
Drummer-
hang on. Go back.
Oh, the boys. We want to talk about that.
Yeah. Go back. Yeah, I wanted to point out that Marcus covered Jack Garcia, who's on now, actually. I see him. He and I were the co-founders of the SF Boys of Leather. And the boy movement was really big in the early 2000s. And it was something that was fairly new. And there was already an LA Boys of Leather. There was a Dallas Boys of Leather. There was also a Seattle Boys of Leather as well. And you guys can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
I just
Okay.
wish the camera-
I heard a little echo and I wasn't sure. But anyway, Marcus came to our very first meeting of the San Francisco Boys of Leather that we started at Daddy's in the Castro when it was Daddy's, not 440 as it is now. And anyway, he came, and it was so funny because he wanted to cover it, of course, for the B.A.R. And one of the boys got snarky and uppity with him about something. And I can't remember exactly what it was. And he got so pissed off. And he started to storm out. And I thought, oh, my God, we're sunk. We will never get anywhere if we don't have Marcus's support. Shit. So I went running and I ran interference because Marcus and I, like I said, got along. We were friends. And he came back and I said, please, please, please. I mean, he was mad. He was really pissed off. And I said, I pulled that boy aside and I said, shut the fuck up. Just shut up. And anyway, it all worked out well. And he supported us from then on. But yeah, that was a little bit of a hairy beginning. We hadn't even started yet. You know, it was great though. He was very supportive after that.
He was such a puppy dog at work. I mean, he would have little arguments with Bob that were 30 years old that I had no idea what the context was, so I would ignore it. But every now and then, you know, he would have his lunch and he would, you know, would say, are we done with this? He'd go, that's right. That was like his catchphrase. And I just remember it with great affection that he just had such a professionalism, but at the same time, 3 drinks and he'd start with the gossip and the bitching. Yeah.
Now, one time I was in the car with him riding to Sacramento, and this was, you know, later on in his years. And I said, okay, I want you to tell me everything that you know about people that you couldn't print. And so just the things that came out of his mouth. And I thought, wow, thank God you never printed this stuff. I mean, I thought the other stuff was bad. This stuff was like, okay. So yeah, you never messed with him.
Doug is saying vitamin V. Is that Marcus's vodka drinks? Is that the
Yes,
joke?
he
Yes.
called it his vitamin V.
Oh my God. Let me go back to the slideshow and we can continue with this lovely visuals. So we have the boys here.
Yeah, that was a fun time. That was really a great time.
And here is a close friend of Marcus, Julian Marshburn. Can never get too many.
Julian.
Goodness. Now, there was a period, I mean, there's debate about the title, the leather titles. Just please tell those who are outside the community about looks versus the personality. Why? How did judging change and shift over the years?
It did. I think some things changed as far as, I mean, when I came into the contest system, we were still memorizing every previous IML and every previous drummer and drummer boy and all of that in case we were asked by the judges. But then it started to shift into more, less of that kind of memorizing certain historical things like that, and more into, at least this was my experience, more into personality and what the person can bring to the community, as opposed to just knowing a bunch of who was IML in like 1984 kind of thing.
I also think one of the things that happened early on in the contest scene was that a certain style of beauty was kind of looked to, and I think what happened over time was that people started to look at different kinds of people, different body types, different people from different, and all of a sudden the contest scene expanded in a way because they were accepting a wider group of people. But there was a time when a lot of the guys looked kind of a lot alike when they won.
Well, one of the other things is the contest, different contests had different meanings, and they weren't actually true, but people looked at IML as the Lenny Brobergs, the people who could give a great speech, who looked good on stage, and they did. But then you also had Guy Baldwin, who's a serious leather man, and on the other side you had drummer, and we were supposed to be the players and that sort of thing, but there was just a lot of crossover. So all the contests had a different genre that they were representing.
Right. Yeah. No, it's fascinating. I want to go back and just talk about the question of those who did more adult photography or videos versus those who didn't. Was there an obligation? Obviously, I don't imagine there was much shame, but did that add points to a competitor or to a person who was in the community?
Actually, I think there was shame.
No.
Yeah.
There was when I was on the calendar, and then I worked with the calendar committee and everything, and there was a big deal for a while about you could, if you had your, and this was also true of title holders too for a while, was people would get mad and school you basically if you were doing something objectionable, in the back of the powerhouse kind of thing with your title vest on. Like, people would get really mad about that. And which I never understood that, because I thought, well, it's leather fetish. I'm just doing it. And but people were like, you should be doing that with your leather vest on. Just take it off. And I thought, I'm caught up in the moment. I'm not going to think about it.
Yeah. It reminds me of a sidebar of gay games where it's like, no, don't take off the medal.
But the Mr. Drummers were required to do a new layout in Drummer magazine. And yeah, it was part of the deal. So in my judging panel, which Race Bannon was one of the judges, I was asked if I would do a spread in Drummer magazine. So in the judging chamber, I just took off all my clothes.
Okay.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. And back then, for many of the contests, the judges would assess if they felt the person running was actually a player. Were they just coming in to win a title? And most of the time, we would err on the side of if they were actually a player, they were really part of the scene, then they got way more points than if we felt they were coming from the outside just to win a contest.
Can you explain to this non-leather newbie? A player means you will have leather sex with a lot more people than just your boyfriend or your partner.
No, it means that you're really our community.
Sorry, crosstalk.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
It means that you're a part of the actual part of the community and not somebody just coming in because you think you're going to win a beauty contest and that's your stepping stone to fame as a porn model or something down the road, which some people did.
Yeah.
I think of a player as someone who has actual BDSM skills. And they play in the dungeon and they know that etiquette and they're growing as a leather person.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first leather contest I ever did, I was questioned on that very topic, actually. How I would clean up after a scene.
Right.
I remember that.
Have someone else do it.
With my tongue. What do you think?
What the boys were for. Well, from implied shame to pride, we're switching to bold colors with Rich's photos from Pride.
That's great.
Really lovely. And 2008. This was a leather goods fair, and somebody was able to name, at least first name, these gentlemen.
I should look that up. It's Off Ramps Leather.
Is it Paul?
Oh, Paul.
Paul Johnson.
Oh,
Yes,
that's
Paul Johnson.
Oh, wow, is he young in that photo?
Yeah.
And here's
Oh,
Mark.
he is.
Before, like half a year before he died, I think. A birthday celebration ad, I think the Powerhouse, pretty sure. And here he is in Chicago at IML 30 with Julian.
Tony Mills and what is his husband's name?
On the
Oh,
left?
I can't remember.
The
Yeah,
far
the
left.
tall one is Tony Mills, and he was
Right.
actually an IML who did a new layout himself.
For Colt. He was a Colt model.
Yes, he was, and on the
Yeah.
calendar.
He helped us with the Bear Chest calendar in Palm Springs one time at an event. He was amazing. He was so much fun.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
He is a great guy.
Well, I love this photo for its color and vibrancy and a moment in history, as well as this one, Rich. Lovely.
Thank you.
I think I met that guy afterwards. I recognized his tattoo. Yes.
The things we could say to that.
Love.
This was actually it was at IML at the puppy play party. What is that called? They had a massive room with,
The mosh.
yes, the mosh.
Oh,
Oh, right. That's
the
right.
kennel where they all commingle. Yes.
I thought that was a lamb.
No, it's a poodle.
Yeah, they're gonna do the song from Gypsy,
It's
Little
like,
Lamb.
whoa. He brought his sheep.
Now, this is the Daddy's Leather Boy contest.
Yeah, Scott, can you extrapolate?
Right, which is different than Drummer and Drummer Boy. Daddy's SF Leather Daddy and SF Leather Daddy's Boy are not just yearly titles. Once you get the title, you have it forever. You have a year, but you still have that title forever. So this is Tony Coaster, who is a previous, still reigning, I guess, SF Leather Daddy, and he's these are the three boys who obviously were competing, and I'm totally blanking out on their names.
Drew.
Oh,
Drew
on
is
the
on the, yeah. And he now works for Square Peg
Oh,
Toys.
really?
Yes.
And Tony's up in Seattle, I think.
Yes,
now.
he is. I
And,
just talked to him the other day.
Ah,
Oh,
I love this shot.
photo.
another Rich Stadtmiller photo documenting the community. This is a real throwback to the olden days when there were actual motorcycle clubs with the white jeans and the black boots were the style, similar to the illustrations that Gayle credited earlier. But I remember seeing photos like this from the 60s, 70s when there were lots of motorcycles.
It
And
used
there
to
were
be that
runs.
the way you knew that a leather bar was successful was they'd have a row of bikes parked out front, and we have photos of both the toolbox and the ramrod with just a row of bikes like this. But this is the Eagle, and much more recently.
Right.
Gail, wasn't there a blessing of the bikes that happened outside?
There was a blessing. There was there was a blessing of the bikes. I think there was a christening of the bikes, and there were lots of rituals around the bikes and around the colors and depending on the club. And one of the problems with my research is that I didn't really get into the clubs early enough until the AIDS epidemic started to decimate them. So I just don't have the kind of data about most of the clubs that I have about other parts of the scene, which is sad.
I do have Marcus photos of him, color photos of him at inside the Eagle where they poured beer all over a motorcycle and blessed it. But I did not include them in this slideshow. Sorry, they were not published.
I think the beer was to wash it off after because it was a golden shower event at first. So that would happen. And then they pour beer.
Yeah, we're not publishing those photos either, but they were very tributary.
One quick thing I want to say about the bikes and the bike clubs is that there was a time when the motorcycle clubs were the the skeletal structure of gay leather social life. And it was the bike club's events that really calendar that people paid attention to. And what happened during the AIDS epidemic is that the title contest began to assume that central role, and the bike club events started to fade as central, social events. So now people do this sort of title circuit where they used to do this club event circuit. There are very few of those events that still take place, but in San Francisco, some of the major ones were the CMC Carnival, the Warlocks Witches Christmas, and so forth. And of course, the granddaddy of them all was the Satyrs Badger Flat down in Southern California.
This is a more recent event, a blending of drag, the sisters, and bingo, and Leatherman, and all kinds of fun.
Yeah, the sisters used to do, they originally called it Bada Bingo. And it was because us calendar guys in the early 2000s went over there and helped them out, and it was a blast. It was so much fun. And it was at the community church in the Castro, SF Community Church. I can't think of is that the name? Anyway, it was a lot of fun, but then they changed
the Catholic church
after that. Huh?
Yeah, one of the
it was the
founders
Catholic
of
church they got kicked out.
Yeah, one of the founders of the sisters was a Leatherman, and Gayle, I'm blanking on his name. Redhead guy.
But there was a connection.
The MCC church. Yeah, MCC, that's what it was.
Tiger.
Anyway, we could play that game all night. I'm switching to 2010. We're back to the toolbox because the first barcode column in the mini magazine Bar tab, which I created and named and was asked to create, was the first historical column was again about the toolbox and that famous Chuck Arnett mural, which has been recreated or somewhere recently by someone else, I forget, but it's just astounding. And here's a little more vanilla variation on Folsom Street Fair by our beloved prolific photographer Stephen Underhill, who's not with us today. Kind of a twink version of it was actually for the September issue, so this was shot at Up Your Alley. It was not shot at Folsom Street Fair. Back to Rich Stadtmiller photos documenting Pride and Flag Corps.
That's the Boots and Breeches.
Oh, okay.
Is it Boots and Breeches or California? Oh, geez. I'm going to get in trouble for that.
I'm sure someone will correct you. And we're back to a Scott Brogan column. Can you tell us a little bit about this, Scott?
Yeah, David Orban was I should say, he's in New York City now, but he was here in San Francisco, and he was a psychologist and also a friend. And he wrote a book called, I want to make sure I get it, Sexual Outsiders, that he published. And so I went to his book signing event, and he was a great guy. He was really into, of course, the psychology of the leather kink world, and he was also part of it as well. And so that was sort of his milieu, for lack of a better term. And so he wrote a lot about that angle of it, the whole psychology into it, about the power exchange and everything that goes along with it.
Now, this is a kind of article that I would not expect Marcus to write, where it was very interesting to see the detours that you and Race took in terms of what Race and I called think pieces, essays. Marcus was not about that as much as reportage of events that happened and gossip of things.
Oh.
This is the temporary closing of the Eagle. This is a rich photo. And a community Leatherman's discussion group.
That's my roommate. That was my roommate, Chris, Jake, or whatever his name is now.
On stage or off stage?
Yeah.
Yeah, this was the big Is Leather Dead panel discussion.
Oh, right.
A lot of
Race, were you on that panel?
I was
and
at
so
that.
I was. Gayle, you were too, correct?
Yeah, and Guy and that fellow from The Instigator, whose name I'm forgetting.
Oh,
Michael Thorne.
Yes, Michael.
that publication. That is one of my favorites. I have like 3 copies. Is it out of print?
It is. I have not seen a new issue in a very long time.
Oh, have to hunt it down on eBay. And here's Race in Scott's column getting a dildo award
Yay!
All right.
The Dildo Awards.
at the
The
Powerhouse.
most prestigious award.
I forgot what that one was for, though. But
Well, you've got so many.
I have 3 or 4.
In many categories.
Put them all.
Aw.
A 2012 Bear Chest
Wow.
final rehearsal, it seems, or performance. And some of you named on the right is Race Cooper. The center is the well, she's not so ubiquitous now. Susan Reba, who was a major fundraiser and nightlife
She's
personality.
still around quite a bit these days.
Oh, good. It's hard to tell who's back and who's like still doing things, but this is quite amusing. I enjoy it.
Adam on the left.
Okay.
Yep.
One of the things I love about this picture is that it shows the sort of different varieties of the leather harness.
Oh, yes. I like the Spartacus one, third from the left.
Oh, wow.
You can hold a scabbard or something in it.
And he's in tennis shoes.
Well, that's probably the socks make up for it because that's like it's very fetish specific. So yeah, he's being eclectic, I suppose.
And you know what? That and this image that you now have on screen, I think shows a side of the community that's just fun.
Yeah.
We're not, it's not always about being super serious. We like to have our fun, be a little silly at times too.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Now, this was the Boys with Balls bowling event.
Oh, that was so much fun.
For several years.
Yeah.
They were a blast.
Another
These are
Race-
the LA guys.
LA guys at IML, I had them all put one foot in.
Yeah, they're a Latin club down in LA. Those
Oh,
guys
this
are.
is all Latino guys. Okay.
Yeah, they're a Latin
Were they
club down in LA.
Payasos?
Yes,
Yeah.
they are.
All right.
There you go.
They go out in clown face.
And this rich historic moment because
It was the very first wedding at IML.
oh,
John Cronengard said he never thought he'd end up being a wedding planner.
what was the bouquet? Was it leather or was it just a bullwhip?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Chuck Redslow presided, and I was bawling like nobody's business.
Oh,
Aw.
sweet and sexy. And here we are at
There's Rich.
I give good, bad Santa.
at the. Tell me again, the world famous turf club. in-
World famous turf club, yes.
How many years have you been the naughty Santa, the leather Santa?
I started doing it, 15 years ago, maybe something like that.
Wow.
The chair has long since broken down. No comments, but yeah.
It's always fun to give away toys. Speaking
Yes.
of toys.
Oh, yes.
Oh my God. This is Andy Cross, the 2013 Mr. SF Leather or International, then International. No, he was Mr. Powerhouse, right?
It's Mr. Powerhouse, then International.
Then
Powerhouse and then
Correct.
IML. Yeah.
Industrial Strength Hotness. I just love this photo. It's so architectural, as I said before. It's a perfect moment along the parade, I think, right, Rich?
Oh, yeah.
And he was just standing, and you got it at the right moment with the scaffolding and the wires, and
That's fabulous.
He was
yeah,
a special kind of title holder because he would walk into a room and he did what I always thought title holders should do is he would introduce people to each
it's a
other.
perfect
and say,
moment.
you're into this and you're into that and you two should meet and talk. And that was what he was. He was kind of an instigator more than anything else. He was really, really good at it.
Very, very well, just so polite and engaging. Every time I saw him at the Powerhouse, he would say hi. He would introduce me to other people. I remember that exact thing, that he didn't put on airs and just being a personable person. And here's a little Folsom coverage. That's my photo for a change. At Action Shot at Folsom from the year before, and Scott's column. And Aiden James, the musician below the fold, performed at the fair at 11 o'clock in the morning. I was one of 5 people who were there for him, devoted. But yeah, they weren't very polite to out of town musicians. The people who organized the fair at the time. Another rich photo that you can just smell this photo, can't you? The food parade was always, and I can smell this one. I'd like Odorama stick for this one. I'd like definitely to get a scent. And somebody knew who these folks were?
Leland Karina on the right, and who now lives up in Oregon, I believe.
Yes.
Okay. Never understand how people can stand wearing all that rubber on those hot days at the fair, but I guess that's kind of the point.
And,
it's
and
sexy.
I don't know if she did this one, but she makes a lot of her own rubber now too.
Wow, that's amazing. And here's a little extra photos from 2013 by Rich, paired with Steven Underhill's more vanilla stuff. We're still on Scott Brogan's years with Mr. SF Eagle.
Big age. He's another pretty boy and a sweetheart.
And does he still work at the Eagle? Is that?
He does.
Oh, good for him. I'll go there and have a beer.
Oh, great.
This is at the Bear Chest Calendar Finals,
Ah.
and this was his marriage proposal. It was the year that it became legal.
Wow. I'm sensing a trend. International Ms. Leather 2013.
And proposals.
And the women in the center, the winners, somebody can remember their names?
Sarha, who is in the fur cap, was the International Ms. Leather, and I am blanking on who the Boot Black is, which I apologize for, but I can't keep all the names in my head.
When did Boot Black competitions start for men and women?
Oh,
Does anyone
Blue
know?
Black's been around forever.
Oh, okay.
been around forever,
Yeah.
but as a contest,
Well, as a contest, no, but I don't know the date that the contest began.
I don't either.
But decades, right?
I don't know. There's nothing to be determined.
Yeah, not
I'm
sure.
just curious. No.
Oh, that's Daddy's barbershop.
And that's the little stage area at the Eagle. And some of you all know who some of these folks are. It's interesting that Rich, you have an obligation to often do these kind of lineup photos and make them more interesting.
Yeah. Jeff Cilione is the one on the left.
Okay.
And is that Beth next to him?
It is Beth, and on the right is Arlen Lassiter, who is the owner of Daddy's Barbershop. And for those that might have heard that they were closing, they are not closing. They are remaining open, so they are around still.
Oh, great.
Both shops? Oh, yes.
The
Yeah.
third wedding photo with Race and Harvey looking on.
So I was best man at Rod and Roger's wedding, and it was a pretty special moment in City Hall with Harvey looking on.
Oh, that's sweet. And who's this, Rich?
Tip Gear, and I cannot Gear Koshan. He's going to hate me. Nobody
Can pronounce his last name. It's okay.
It's French. That's all we know.
They mangled it on stage at IML when he came in second. And they also said he was from Santa Rosa.
He is from San Jose.
Yes.
One thing about Tib, when he was about 3 years ago, I want to say, he was the MC for International Mr. Leather in Chicago, and every contestant from every country, he introduced them in their native language.
Okay.
And so he spoke about 6 or 7 different languages, just, in snippets, but perfectly. And
Wow.
everyone was so impressed that he did it.
Wow. Yeah. This is Scott's column about the language of electricity.
Yes, which, by the way, I did test out all of those products on myself. And I had a great time. So I wanted to, talk about the product properly. So
You're so dedicated with your research.
I'm not just
right,
a spokesman. I'm in the club.
You can't do the Tide commercial unless you actually try it, right?
So they did spark joy.
It did.
Thank you. I'm here till Tuesday. And now we segue to Race Bannon's first leather column in the B.A.R. in January of 2014.
And
there's Tib, a photo of Tib in the bottom.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's
was.
Is that Andy again in the top right?
It is. I love how Race you introduced yourself in this column and said why you're doing it, and you took me all of 5 seconds after Scott departed to say, who else would I get? Well, who's the most well-spoken person in the leather community on earth? Oh, that's Race Bannon. And then you just dove right into the events. It's just like and let's pick up where we left off. I really appreciated that.
Well, I certainly appreciated you asking.
And then there's a special rubber event with Nancy French and some other fabulous people in those photos.
We were trying to give rubber more profile because that scene has been growing, significantly for years, and it was important to sort of represent rubber as much as leather and everything else.
Yeah, pull the rug out on traditions, but traditions are also. Here's another Hotel Whitcomb. For many years, the Hotel Whitcomb was the home of many of these local leather contests, right? We discussed in there.
It was, yeah.
So on the left is Will Victoria, and then what's his name now?
Stephen Ferris.
Okay, and then Gage, and then Red, and then I should know the guy that the next two.
It was lives in Florida now. I can't remember.
Yeah, pull the rug out on traditions, but.
And then Gage, and then Red, and then I should know the guy that the next two.
It lives in Florida now. I can't remember.
Yeah, pull the rug out on traditions, but. I'm going to go off of this for a bit because we are getting some bouncing echoes. We're getting a whole loop feed going on, so I'm just going to stop that for a second. Can everybody just say hello so I can hear you?
Hello.
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 Okay, I'm going to go back to the photos, and hopefully it's not going to mess up again. So let's move on. We're running out of time, but we can go over time. It doesn't matter, but if everyone gets exhausted. Here's Nick Elliott, Missy Bootlover, and Lance Holman.
Well, yeah, Miss V is actually one of my sisters in Onyx, and Lance is one of the founders of Onyx Northwest. So both of them are Onyx members, and Miss V was one of the first boot blacks to ever boot black in the Powerhouse.
Oh, okay.
And Nick on the left was an international Mr. Boot Black, and in my recollection was, and there probably were people before, was one of those people that championed boot blacks internationally. He would show up at every event and not only boot black, but sort of champion them as being front and center with everyone else.
When there's a shine on your shoes, there's a melody in your heart. Okay, moving into races, Folsom Street Fair coverage, and we love the flag. We love the flag dancers, don't we? Flaggers.
And that's David Wickman, who lives in Palm Springs. And he actually honored me by gifting me those flags after he spun those.
Aw. Yeah, that really made for great visuals every year.
He's a great guy. He is a great guy.
Boat rides.
That's Mario in the front.
Okay.
Yes. This is Golden Gate Guards leather cruise. They ran it for several years up until a couple of years ago. They stopped for some reason, and then COVID came about. But they were fun.
I hope they revive them.
This is the 2015 or 14, no, in 2014 for the 2015 Mr. SF Eagle contest. I love how the Christmas lights, Rich. I mean, you get a different angle. It's December, so of course you get that angle, and it makes it unique. It's not just another guy standing there. It has its own unique moment because it's timely and holiday, and I just love it. I think it's great, as well as this.
More rubber.
More rubber.
They were competing to be on a calendar.
Oh, okay. And more sisters, and then a lovely boot black, getting the shine on the shoes. And who is this again?
Sue B.
Sue B in 2004 at Pride. Here's the IML again in 2015.
Tyler McCormick.
Tyler McCormick. And he was the first trans person to win and also first person in a wheelchair to win. Is that correct?
Yes, there was one finalist the previous year.
That was in a wheelchair.
Yeah, in a wheelchair, not a trans man.
Yeah. Now, I remember that was a big deal at the time. A lot of people were really pissed off at IML for allowing a trans person to compete at the time.
It was incredibly divisive. A lot of people were upset. The vast majority of the community was absolutely on the side of course, he should have won. He actually legitimately won and should be the one who is on top of the podium. But there was a small subset of very vocal people who were very pissed off for a while. But, you know, culture has changed and we moved on, hopefully.
And there
Well, but you know
there
that.
had been trans people who competed earlier, I believe. Billy Lane competed earlier, didn't he?
He did.
I think so.
Yes, he did.
So I think Billy might have been the first trans man to compete, but he didn't win. Tyler was the first trans man to win.
The current IML is also a trans man who's Black. And again, one of my Onyx brothers. But even when he won, I don't know, was that 2 years ago? There was still a lot of backlash. And, 2020, with people not wanting a trans man to win. So, the fact that he was a man of color, is a man of color, and trans, he had to battle all that and does it quite well, I must say.
Wow. Yeah.
I think maybe some of that goes back to what we were talking about earlier with the, what are they looking for? Is it the image? Is it, is it that cookie cutter Tom of Finland thing? Like certain people have ideas like, well, IML should be like the big man. Because I remember when I competed with my collar and the lock, and that was the first time anybody had gotten in the top 5 with a lock and a collar on. And I was told before I even left San Francisco by a lot of people, you should take that off because you'll never win.
Oh,
so wow. There was a lot of division on the whole image thing. And I think that's why people are still upset about the whole trans issue,
right?
Which shouldn't be an issue at all.
Well, but there are people who have biases, even though they're in sub communities, they still see a kind of cliquishness and activity pervades. And here's guys who smoke cigars. Some people might have a problem with that. I don't.
There's a cigar party at the Eagle tonight, by the way.
Oh, okay. Head on out. Sometimes a cigar is more than a cigar. I'm sorry, there's something. So I understand the fetish. I would not smoke one again since I got sick off one, but I understand the idea of it. Now, can we talk about, all the gorgeous men here, people in the photo, but this is an opportunity, as we discussed in our rehearsal, to talk about the other events, not just bar events and competitions, but the dinners and the gatherings that happen that create community.
Yeah, every year they do a big sort of leather dinner, and this is at Don Ramon's and south of Market. And Don Ramon's was absolutely and always has been a supporter, not just of the leather community, but the LGBTQ community generally. So anytime a leather group or a kink group wanted to have a big dinner, they opened their arms. They always were amazing to the community.
Yeah, they were great. And the staff was always 100% supportive and friendly. And it was always a great time and good food.
And Bluff has their dinner there. And it's a big fundraiser. They donate all the money from that dinner. I can't remember what Bluff stands for. Breeches, leather.
Uniform fetishists.
Fan
club.
Fan club.
Oh. Fan club. Okay.
And Andy Cross, the Elizabeth Taylor of the leather community.
Absolutely.
He wouldn't mind that description at all.
Jim Miko obituary. Gayle, did you want to?
This picture is Jim Miko, who was a very, very dear man and one of the more underappreciated figures in our community. He was a leather man. He was a printer. He had a shop over on 10th Street. He printed the menus for the ambush. He printed the Dick-a-Day calendar for Brush Creek Productions. He just did a lot of local printing. But in the 90s, he started to become a land use person, and he ended up doing a number of things. He ran something called the Soma Leadership Council, and he also was the person who was the genius behind the Western Soma Citizens Planning Task Force, which came up with zoning regulations for South of Market that were attempting to make the development down here more neighborhood friendly and less destructive.
Right.
Unfortunately, he died about, I can't remember when he died. It was a few
August
years
3rd,
ago.
2015. August 3rd, 2015.
Yeah, it just seems like it was 2 minutes ago, but that's like 6 years ago. And since he's been gone, a lot of the regulations that were put in place, a lot of the zoning protocols that were put in place have been ignored and violated, and developers have managed to get exemptions from them. So we're having the kind of development in many ways that he fought so bitterly. He was just a wonderful man and a guardian of the neighborhood, and very underappreciated. But I feel like there have been 4 major attempts to preserve the neighborhood against the kind of capital-intensive development that has been eating away at it for decades. The first was the fight over the Yerba Buena complex down near what is now the Moscone Center. That resulted in a lawsuit against the city, for which to settle it, the city gave some money for a low-income senior housing that is administered by TODCO, the Tenants and Owners Development Corporation. And Michael Valerio, who was one of the founders of Folsom Street Fair, used to work for TODCO, by the way. That's how he and Kathleen Connell got together. And the second round was the Folsom Street Fair. They really tried to continue this attempt to preserve the neighborhood. And the third round was this Western Soma Citizens Planning Task Force that Jim Miko led so ably. And now we have the Leather and LGBTQ Cultural District, and all of these entities have had different tools to try to preserve the neighborhood.
Yeah.
But Jim Miko really is an unsung hero. He did a lot to keep us here.
There's a lot of transformation going on that can't be avoided, but it's great to see that there are some efforts made. We're referencing back now with Michael Flanagan's Barchive feature on the Soma fire that was referenced earlier. And the actual photographer, Janet Delaney, who took photos of the day, had an exhibit at the time, well-timed, and graciously loaned the photos, but I insisted on paying her because archival photos like this are priceless, but, well, they do have a price, and I like to pay. But I love the juxtaposition of joy and tragedy, the monochrome tints of everything. Max Leger is one of the designers of the paper and usually lays out pages for me, and he's able to make this work. The fonts, the use of repetition, and the juxtaposition, it just makes it really much better than it could be, but with a kind of mediocre hand.
Gayle, can you talk for a minute about the fire? I think a lot of people might not have much information on that.
Well, we did mention it earlier, but this was in 1981, and it destroyed, it didn't destroy the barracks itself, but it destroyed the building that had been the site of the barracks, the Folsom Street Barracks, the bathhouse, and the former Red Star Saloon on the corner there. You see here two of Mark Chester's pictures. The fire ate into about half of his apartment, but not all of it. It was just a major event. And you mentioned Janet Delaney, the photographer. She has a couple of books out of photos of South of Market. She lived down here. She's had an exhibit at the DeYoung and places. And right after the fire, she and Connie Hatch did a gallery show of photographs about it called Five Alarm Fire. I think it was the old New Langton Arts. But this fire really was just a huge event in terms of destroying a piece of the neighborhood. Such that the buildings that were built in the ruins were more upscale. It burned the apartments of several key people, including the artist Rex, who lost much of his original artwork in the fire. And there was a lot of really stupid publicity about how it had been started by paupers, or that there would be the bodies of slaves chained to their beds, burned in the ruins. Of course, there were no such bodies, but the newspaper coverage of it initially was really quite sensationalist.
Michael quotes a lot of the sensationalist Chronicle. Actually, it led the way for the sensationalist coverage.
Chronicle was dreadful.
Yeah, and it still is. Oops. But anyway, that was covered quite. Michael is another obsessive historian who can really get to the chase of like finding out who was most culpable, and he quotes a lot in this article. If you want to look it up, it's also available on issue.com as well as the our website. Moving on, we can go over time a little bit, I feel, but I want to move forward to more lovely Folsom, mostly these Folsom covers, and then IML from 2017, and then the departure of Chuck Renslow.
For people who don't know who Chuck Renslow was, he was the founder of the International Mr. Leather Contest. It emanated from the Gold Coast, which was the preeminent leather bar in Chicago that every leather person frequented. And he was quite an iconic figure in the leather community.
Yeah.
And the co-founder of the Leather Archives and Museums.
Yes.
Here he is with Marcus back in earlier days. That was included in another. Now, I want to bring in the modern version of leather and kink. and the, as I called in our chat earlier, the circuitification of Kink. And any comments anyone wants to make on the circuit parties where the guys will just put on a few straps and chaps and then dance the night away. Not judging, just saying that there are certain people who really aren't players.
Well, I'm gonna chime in and say that I go to quite a few of those, and I can say that a lot of them really are players, but you're absolutely right. Some of them put on a jock, put on a harness, they dance for the night, and that's it. But there definitely are people that are players within those crowds. Okay. That said, the visual representation of kink at these parties is rather interesting, especially the harness, how much the harness is so popular at these various circuit dance parties.
Yeah, it's almost de rigueur, like eyelashes for drag shows.
Kind of, yeah.
And I forget the guy in the middle who did porn, who has all those marvelous tattoos. But did he win this contest?
He did.
Yes.
What's his name? I can't remember his porn name or his real name.
I cannot remember.
Anyway.
he works with Gage at the bar at the Eagle.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll have to stop by.
He's a great graphic artist. I'm blanking on his name.
Yeah, I've tipped him many times when he's go-go dancing. And here's Colleen, aka Queen Cougar.
Queen Cougar, yeah. Now, Queen Cougar was one of, I think I mentioned earlier, I'm not sure, that she was instrumental in getting me to the job of writing for the B.A.R.
Yes.
So.
And Queen Cougar, I just want to say Queen Cougar, being a woman of color and a Miss San Francisco leather, really brought people of color into the scene, because suddenly we saw someone who looked like us, especially women, because the women of color weren't seeing women of color. And so Queen Cougar winning Miss San Francisco leather and being very involved. She would put on fundraisers. I remember one time she put on a Leather Family Feud. So she was always involved, always doing things, and is still fairly involved. She's helping me with a project with my local chapter of Onyx. So she's still Cougar, the queen, leading the way.
That's great.
And she was very close to Marcus. He called her, I think, his daughter. And she was very close to him up until he died, and then took care of a lot of his effects afterwards.
Right.
Between her and Julian
Marshburn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's we still have some of Marcus's stuff that was accessioned, some still to be sent to the archives, but Colleen was quite close to him, and also a great singer. She still is. Thank God we got her for a couple of the bestie parties to have her sing a song and co-MC.
Ha!
Oh, look at that.
Look at that.
Hi, Graylin.
Well, hi. Well, the people, that's Onyx, which is a BDSM leather club for men of color. Here in the Bay Area, there are chapters all over the United States, but we are Northern California, or Northern Northwest. The man on my left, the shorter one, is Trey. He's the current Mr. San Francisco Leather and is one of the founders of Onyx. And the guy on my right is Orpheus, who's another one of the founding members of Onyx.
Oh. And this was a kind of group tabling at the SF8's place on Castro Street?
Strut. Yes, Strut. There we were at Strut. Old home.
I can tell by the stairs. Again, a little combination of theater and street Leatherpalooza with bologna. Love bologna. They're so fun. They always have a special kinky themed dance or two for the September show, and they have one coming up at Oasis.
And there's a great documentary that they have about
13th Gen Films. Look them up. Mark Smolowitz and others. And this is ARC.
The guy closest to us is Eric, and he was a Mr. California Leather, also an Onyx member, and lives down in Southern California.
Right.
Yeah, I think this was actually at Somart's.
That's what I think it is. If you're looking in the background, the lofty, because the seats and everything, because there were a lot of leather events there. A little more circuitiness. Now, this is real bad.
This is real bad, definitely.
For anyone who doesn't know what they are, can you give us a little mini description, Race?
Sure. Real Bad started in a garage. It was a small dance of guys that got together as a fundraiser. And then it grew into what you're looking at today, which is a dance that is hosted on the Sunday of Folsom Street Fair after the fair. And they are the hottest tickets in town. And it's an all volunteer group. And 100% of net proceeds go to charities they pick every year, 4 to 5 charities.
And where did this take place?
10:15 Folsom usually.
Oh, it's at 10:15. Okay.
Yes.
And this is one of the largest leather flags that we've seen in at least today. I don't know if there are bigger ones anywhere else.
Is the one at the Eagle bigger?
No.
It's pretty big, but I don't know if it's bigger.
I think it would have to.
You know, we need to measurements here. Oh, you size queens.
This is a lovely duo portrait by our friend Dot. He also shot the cover of my 6th novel, so I have a bias. And here's the photo. I think I took this one of go-go dancer Paul William, at the epicenter of a recent Folsom Street Fair.
He's everywhere.
He's everywhere. And here's one of Race's later columns about infighting in the community.
Never.
Convention.
No, this is one of my favorites because it's a think piece. You're talking to the community, but you're also talking about it so that outsiders can kind of get, oh, I see there's some friction going on and they're working on it. It's just nice. I really appreciate it.
And we're learning that we have to share space with each other.
Yeah. Speaking of space, here we're talking about this little photo of the Catalyst and a beer bust and some other events. And Race kept up with the magic of Google Lists with events going on that I transferred. Here's the one of our last leather, Ms. San Francisco Leather 2020. And here's Race's final column.
Ta-da!
That was a great shot.
Isn't it?
Yeah, Alex Ray took that shot.
That's right. Very nice.
very
Very nice. We saved it for then. And
Not jealous in the
we
least.
did get you back for our 50th anniversary issue to talk about the 5 decades of leather that we've just been discussing, which is here we are again with the Why Not and other great moments in leather coverage. I just wanted to repeat things, and I'll get out of the photo thing. I wish I could.
Bob, let me point out that Bob Goldfarb has just posted that the flag at the Eagle is 30 feet by 18 feet, and he would know. I don't know how big that other flag at the dance party is.
I love Bob. You know, who else is going to know that? You know, Bob Goldfarb. You can always depend on Bob Goldfarb.
I'm showing some of the chat links. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Eric. Where people are making comments. Eric I was on a motorcycle and bike helping a friend move. Also, alas, puppy play. We did discuss puppy play a little bit, but not enough. There can never be too much.
And one of the things that I think people might have noticed if they looked at the photos carefully was many, many years ago, pups were around.
Yeah.
It isn't that new. It's certainly grown significantly in recent years, but it's been around for a long time.
There's very little that's really new. It's just that things that people did that were occasional or a few people doing them have budded into little subcultures. I mean, there's a time when we didn't even have the bears as a subculture. There were bears around, but then bears became a subculture. And the same thing with puppies and bootblacks and many of the little specialty groups that we have now.
Gear.
You know, there was a photo that we kind of skipped through there at the end. You don't have to bring it back up, but it was of the Ms. San Francisco Leathers, and Katie was one of them. And I just want to point out that she became Ms. San Francisco Leather right before the COVID pandemic, and is still carrying that title and is still doing the work, you know, so she has like a 2-year stint. So I just wanted to make sure that we didn't just pass her up.
Okay. Yeah, this is part of the reason. I mean, Race, your decision to cease writing your column was partially based on, well, there aren't any events going on, and also you said that you said all you wanted to say in about a few hundred columns over.
I think 170 some columns. It was partly personal life decision. Partly I thought I had said what I needed to say. And part of it was that which is kind of ironic since I'm on this, is that sometimes there's a little bit too much of me, and I think other voices need to be heard. And so I wanted other writers to come in and other points of view to happen. So whether it's in the B.A.R. or not, I just wanted people to hear other voices.
Yeah. No, I felt the same way after 10 years of my sports column, that it was like, I've interviewed someone in every single sport and every famous living out LGBT, athlete. I really am just repeating myself after that, although it was an honor to fill the boots of previous sports columnists like Tom Waddell. It was like, I've done enough. And I just wonder if someone else wants to step up now that events are going on. I'd be interested in anyone who can write, maybe not be able to write as well as your predecessors, but people who can write well, who are interested in representing the community. Because we do have a gap now. John Carr doesn't write about porn. We have a Cornelius Washington fills in with sexuality-based films and books, but I've never been embarrassed about the sexy parts of the B.A.R. I mean, that was like the first thing I saw was like, oh, you do that. Okay.
Well, we do need consistent coverage of leather social life and events and fundraisers and all of the things that are happening. And I do feel a lack now that there is no regular column, and I have felt this lack at other times when there were gaps in having a column. I don't know. It's not an easy thing to get somebody to do who can do it well, but I do miss it. I mean, I understand why Race had enough. But as someone put in,
says there's never enough Race Bannon.
I was going to say Jay Harcourt
is very sweet.
How I feel about Race, but I do think we need some kind of more consistent window into the community that is accessible to everybody to read, and it just keeps people up to date. It keeps people connected in a way that nothing else quite does. Although perhaps this is happening in social media. Since I'm a social media resistor, I don't participate. So that may fill some of that gap for others, but I really do miss having a column.
Well, I think it would be important to have a column along with social media, because social media, we all get in our little silos and we might not necessarily all get the same information, but something like the B.A.R. with the leather column would definitely be the catch-all for everything, and the point where everyone would get their information from and know that what they're getting is legitimate, good information, and it's not just somebody's Facebook page or something like that. I mean, Facebook is all, social media is all over the place. And like I said, everybody's in their own little silos, whereas the B.A.R. is a point that everyone can go to.
Well, there's also the other problem with social media and the internet in general. Nobody can say anything. I mean, there's no vetting that has to happen. But there's another problem, which I mean, as someone who really cares about keeping track of history, I hear from my friends on Facebook that they can't find things that were there 3 days ago.
Right.
I was able to go back to, the obituary of Paul Bentley and find out who the Tsarina de Miracle-Mile was tonight, because it was printed and it's preserved that way. And the internet doesn't leave, much less social media, doesn't leave that kind of archive.
No,
and
true.
Even the Internet Archive, the Wayback Machine or whatever they call it these days, does not quite have the impact of being able to look up newspapers. So there really is a difference in the kind of information that gets preserved as well as the kind of information that circulates.
Yeah.
Gayle, you just said something really interesting you always say things that are interesting to me, so that's nothing new. But you mentioned looking at an obituary, and that's something that we didn't really talk about. For a while, all the obituaries ran in the back of the B.A.R., and I remember daily or every Thursday looking through the obituaries to see who was there. And a lot of those people were leather people and people that we had seen at our fundraisers and all of that. So, the B.A.R. was really, really important on keeping us up to, who's here, who needs our help, and that sort of thing during the AIDS epidemic.
That's right. And obituaries, by the way, they're an incredible source of information, historical information, whether they're in the B.A.R. or the New York Times. There was an obituary about Jim Miko in the B.A.R. that really summarized a lot of what he had done. If you want to know what he did, You can go look at that obituary. If you want to know about the artist who worked on the toolbox, you can read Bill Tillman's obituary. And that's, Alan Selby, any number of, there are hundreds of people that have, you can actually see something about them in those obituaries. It's important that they be done as well as that they be preserved and accessible.
It's very difficult these days. I just had a friend die that many people know, and it has fallen on me in the old days to call up the grieving partner and say, could you tell me your name? They would often exclude themselves from the obituary, or get the photo, or have to transcribe a handwritten letter, literally teardrops on the letter. So that's the early 90s. The new version is all these rumors go flying around on social media as to what happened to this person, and no one has a fact, and no one will step up and write the obituary. They'll just fly it all over the place until it settles and everyone becomes bored. It's very disgraceful. But they expect the B.A.R. and other publications to just automatically come up with a full Wikipedia entry of everything in their lives, and you can't do that. I had to interview 9 different people to get the obituary for Matthew Simmons, aka Peggy Legs, and it took me 20 hours because nobody had.
People don't realize is how much work it takes to actually do good journalism, and why it takes money, because you need to actually pay people to do it, because all of the volunteer stuff, that's what you get on social media.
Right.
But if you want quality journalism, somebody has to pay for it and support people to do it. And you can tell that the B.A.R. is running on a much tighter budget these days than it did 20 years ago for all kinds of reasons. One of them being social media, the other being COVID, and there are just a lot of reasons. But newspapers are so important, and too many of them are folding. And I just want the B.A.R. to continue to flourish and thrive, but it can't do everything it used to do until there's more money to do it.
We did get a good resurgence in ads and editorial for the Fall Arts Preview. We expanded the pages. We're breathing. The checks are all clearing. So that's a good thing. But it's still, people expect it for free, and they expect not to have to pay for it, and that's frustrating. Anyway, this has been great. It's been free, but it took a lot of work.
This is free.
But collectively, between the 5 of you, I think there are like 150 years of experience and research in the leather kink community that we just had to encapsulate into this little show. But I'm really thrilled and happy that you all participated. And Race, you want to do some final words as well?
First of all, thank you for the topic and for asking me to pull these people together. And when you pull people together like this, you don't have to say much, because you have these brilliant people that have all these great thoughts and all this great experience. So thank you to Gayle, Graylin, Rich, Scott. Jim, thank you for the topic and navigating all this in the first place. Jim did a lot of work, everyone, behind the scenes, pulling all that imagery together.
Thank you, Joe.
All him.
Thank you.
So he did an amazing job doing that. So thank you for doing that.
It was fun.
Thank you, Race, too.
Yes.
Well, I'm gonna pull the button then. If everyone's happy, this will be subscribe to our YouTube channel, and it'll be on Facebook already. As soon as it closes, it's been live. Thanks for everyone for watching. If you have other comments to leave, you can feel free to do them, and we'll leave it all. Thank you all for taking time to speak. So great. Love B.A.R. Thank you, Nick Rice.
Thank
And
you.
everyone.
Good to see you all.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Are we still on?
No, I'm ending broadcast.